Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the cause of Jesus Christ around the world. Today, we have Tom Jones with us. Many of you know Tom as a church planner up in Pennsylvania and as a pastor, but you may not be aware that he went and completed his master's degree in counseling at Liberty University. And I believe you graduated in 2016, did you, Tom?
2016, correct.
Went on, became a licensed professional counselor, and today he has a practice where he helps people with a multitude of problems. And we're going to talk about a little bit of the work that Tom has been doing and how he came to do that. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today, my friend, on the Better Together podcast.
Thank you, Brother Eddie. I've been excited about the opportunity to talk about this, and I'll tell you, you get me start talk about this, brother, I'll talk all day.
Well, I'm right there with you, Tom, but I've got to start out with, how in the world does a fellow go from being a pastor to a professional counselor? Some people would think those two things don't work together, but they do, don't they?
I think they do, brother. I tell you, my story is one that people that would have seen me at the national convention or whatever, would have heard me laughing, that have seen me cutting up and carrying on with folks. But most of the time, brother, I was laughing to keep from crying, and I was dying on the inside, and part of it was just simply how I viewed myself, and how I was seeing myself as a failure in ministry. Even though we had come here to the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and started a couple of churches, I just saw myself as this failure, and then reached a point where the church, and the first church we started here, it looked like that church was going to have to close. And I tell people, it's just like somebody reached in and turned the light switch off. I was done. I was angry at God. I was angry. My thought was, all right, I got to go tell all these people that I'm this loser after all. They're all going to see through this facade that I'm really a loser. And so I came to a point where it was really a crisis point, and where I began to seek counseling. And I was in counseling for 6 years. And so it was through that God led me to pursue a counseling degree. And I remember thinking, God, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know how to do this. But one thing I do want to do, God, is I want to give people a safe place to talk, where they can talk about anything. They won't receive condemnation. They're not going to get anything from me other than support. Now, that doesn't mean that we talk about that sinfulness is okay, but that they can come. It's a safe place to talk about anything they want to talk about. That's how I made that jump.
And you did, and really, you kind of came alive as you're studying counseling and started seeing the ways that worked with your past ministry and what it could be. And it's really become something special, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When I got into counseling, really the reason I started going and quite frankly, spending the money that I spent at my age, I was in my 50s already. I'm 59 now. So I was 53, I guess, when I graduated, and spending all that money and all that time. And my purpose and what I really believed God was leading me to do was to work with pastors. But it seemed like the different avenues that I tried just wasn't going that direction. So I do a lot of individual work. I do work with pastors, but probably maybe 25% of the folks that I work with currently is pastors in different denominations, and some Free Will Baptists. But it was really working with pastors that was my desire. And I kind of decided, okay, well, God, I guess I missed that some way because it doesn't seem to be working out. And then I received the email and asking me about, hey, Tom, what do you think about some things that we're thinking about here? And all excited about it. So, yeah, so my passion is to work with pastors because I am one. I know what it's like. I've been a pastor for 40 years. I know what that's like. And so that's where my passion is.
No, that's great. So let's talk about that email for a little bit. So
sure.
Many of our listeners know all about the Refresh program, the partnership with the Executive Office and North American Ministries. And so we've been working to try to help churches and do our best to encourage pastors. And so Dr. Ransom, Dr. Crow, we started talking about a new element of this is to make professional counseling available to our pastors and their families. And so that's what you're alluding to there.
Mm-hmm.
you have taken on this role of helping us out to provide some professional counseling via Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
confidential, and we're doing
Mm-hmm.
this where the pastors do not have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
This is really what you're doing, Tom, is it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. So let's talk a little bit about that. What is it that through this new program, if you will, which it's just basically contact us and we put them in touch with you and you work with them. But what is it that you see how it can help pastors and their families?
Well, I think one of the things you can do, primarily, again, give them that safe place to talk. There's something about people talking. And I know you've seen this in your counseling practices, your counseling experience. People are talking, they're saying something, and then they say, you know what, now that I hear myself say that out loud, and so really there's just something about having somebody that'll listen. And I preached a sermon a couple, 3 years ago called The Value of Being Heard. And I go into the Genesis story in the Adam and Eve, and when Adam and Eve sinned, and how God could have stormed in there and said, "Get out here, you heathens! I know what you did. To get out here and take your punishment." But He didn't do that. He engaged them in conversation, and that didn't change what was going on. But I do think that I believe that God wanted them to see that they still had value in His eyes, even though they had sinned. So. And one of the things that I love about doing it, the online part of it, is especially pastors that pastor in small communities where they know everybody. The pastor doesn't necessarily want to see his car sitting in front of the local counseling practice. And so one of the things about online, they can be in their own home, they can be on their phone and doing video in a car. They can be in the privacy of their office and nobody knows. And so it makes it a lot more private. And I've done a lot of online therapy, and it's extremely successful. And again, it's that giving them that safe place to talk in the privacy of their home, their office, or whatever it might be.
And I should add, we've kind of piloted this program with you already. So we've had some situations and we've had folks that have come to work with you. And one of the things I will say is they seem to be just very relieved that it was another pastor. So they're talking to someone that knows a bit about what it's like to be in the ministry, regardless of the particular situation that they were working with. So, Tom, I think that's something that you bring to the table that, if we paid for them to see a counselor, which we might end up doing, we should say that you look at the situation, you're assessing the situation, you're trying to figure out what it is they need. But sometimes that's a little different because you're depending upon the issue you're facing. It may be completely unrelated to,
absolutely.
They may not really understand a lot about.
Absolutely. And I think too, with my years of being a pastor, I was actually in a session earlier today with an individual who's not a pastor, but his wife and he had been seeking some marriage counseling, and they're close to my age. And the counselor was 31 years old. And he said, "Tom, I just don't feel like I connected with him." He said, "One of the things I appreciate about you, Tom," he said, you're seasoned." I said, "Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I've been around the block a time or two." And I get what he's saying.
Yeah.
And so, I've been down that road. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to compare yourself to others. I know what it's like to beat your head against the wall and feel like nothing's happening and you're preaching your heart out and people don't seem to be listening. And, Eddie, I'll be honest with you, among the pastors that I've worked with, typically, here's what I see. I see just some depression, some sadness, some discouragement because they've been working hard and they're not seeing any results. Some of them I see things may be going well in the church, but there's a lack of connection in the home, in the pastor's home, which creates some issues. And then, quite frankly, I will see some compulsivity issues with pastors that may be struggling. And so those are really some of the three main areas that I've seen in pastors that we work with. And so I do a lot of just helping us catch the words that we use about ourselves. One of the favorite verses that the Lord has brought to my mind lately is Proverbs 25:11, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. Like
Yeah.
we often, we will tell our children not to say bad things about others, but we often don't really stop and think about the words that we're using in reference to ourselves. And I think the words are critically important because the Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Yes.
And so you learn a lot about a person by the words that they use.
That's great. So thank you for what you're doing, Tom. And our listeners, I want to encourage you to pay attention to what Tom's saying. Think about his heart, what he can offer. And if you're looking in the video, I want you to look at the back. There's a DSM-5 over his left shoulder. And so you say, what does that mean? That means that, hey, he can help with any number of issues, the kinds of things, the stresses we face in the ministry, but also really any problem we might encounter. Doesn't mean that he would continuously work with folks on that, but he would help confidentially to identify where one could get help for that.
Perhaps point them in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
And, and one of the things is, I think we should point out, we did a survey of our pastors and we asked them also about their needs of their wives, which we're probably going to do one with just the pastors' wives. But anyway, that's what they wanted. They wanted confidentiality, and exactly what is kind of laid out here.
And affordability.
Yes, affordability. So we feel like we've met the needs that they alluded to in that survey. And it's just going to be a good way to help us to be all we can be.
Sir. Yes, sir. You know, Eddie, another verse that comes to my mind is iron sharpens iron.
Yes.
One man helps another. I tell people all the time that just because I'm sitting in this chair, I've got the degree hanging on the wall. I've got my license from the state of Pennsylvania hanging on the wall. But many of the listeners will know Pam. Listen, when you see Miss Pamela, you ask her if Tom gets it right all the time, and she will quickly tell you, no, he does not. So just because I'm sitting in this chair doesn't mean that I get it right all the time. I tell folks all the time, we're just folks trying to live for Jesus. And I have some training now to listen for some things and maybe redirect some thoughts and reframing some words and how to just really listen and not be judgmental. Because of what I went through, brother, I can't throw stones. I'm not here to condemn. I'm here to help and walk together. That's my heart. That's my passion. If I worked with nothing but pastors and their wives, I'd be happy. And as God leads, we'll see what happens. But that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm doing this.
Well, Tom, we appreciate you doing it. It costs money. It costs time. So much effort. We appreciate Miss Pam, but I really, and I think I've shared this with you before, I really believe this is an Esther 4:14 kind of moment. All of this was building up to God using you at this particular time, this particular place. And a person has to be willing. We have a free will to reject, or to accept. And so we thank you for your willingness to get the training, to get the preparation,
I'm honored.
Not to quit. And we just appreciate what you're doing there in your community, but also what you're doing with other pastors and our own Free Will Baptist pastors and their families. We thank you so much for the good work you're doing, my brother.
I'm honored. And Eddie, let me tell you something. I look forward to coming to the office every day. I pray. I say, God, I have no idea what I'm going to hear today. Our good friend Neil Gilliland, when I was thinking about pursuing a ministry in counseling, I talked to Neil, got his idea. He said, Tom, I'm not worried about you doing the academics. He said, brother, it's the heaviness of it. I didn't know what he meant that day, Eddie, but since then I've reached out to him and I said, Neil, now I know, brother. Now I know. But my goodness, I love what I do. I actually find out, and some people may not understand this, but I actually find this more rewarding than I did as a pastor. When I tell people all the time, God has given me front row, center stage seats to watch him do amazing things. He does the healing. I'm hopefully just some conduit that he can use.
Oh, absolutely. You were made to do this, my brother. So
Pam said to me one time, not long ago, she said, Tom, have you ever thought that maybe God wanted you to be a counselor all the way back? I said, not in my wildest dream did I think that, but I think God has done things and I'm willing. Listen, if that's what if this is what he wants me to do, maybe they'll roll me out of here on a gurney someday. I don't know, but I just love what I do, brother.
Well, thank you and keep doing it. And hey, I want to encourage our listeners. Would you please lift up Brother Tom in prayer? Pray for him. Pray for Miss Pam.
Yes.
Pray for our pastors and their families
Yes.
out there. Pray that God will give them strength and will allow us to help them and do everything you can to support them as well. And just remember, as we continue to work together, we truly do accomplish a great deal for Christ. So thank you all for what you're doing. Thank you, Brother Tom, for what you're doing.
You're welcome. May I say this? You said a moment ago, this takes effort. This is taking money. And this is going to be a pretty big project. But brother, every pastor's wife is worth everything. Is worth everything that we can put into this.
Absolutely. And so please pray, please give to support this ministry.
Absolutely.
If you're interested in receiving the counseling, we encourage you just to email us. It's a confidential email. Just email us at questions@nafwb.org and let us know. I'm interested. I'm a pastor. You will have to know who you are, and we'll take it and we'll get you tied into Tom. We'll go from there. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Tom, for what you're doing, my brother.
Thank you, Eddie, thank you for this time today. I really appreciate it.
We want to encourage you, our listeners. We thank you for listening. How about taking the podcast, share it with someone that it would be a benefit to them? Maybe review us wherever you get your podcast from. And remember, we truly are better together.